Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
So Maurice would have been 98 yesterday. In my own personal world, he interviewed me for my PhD place in 1974, and my whole career has, whereas for him it was essentially from retirement and on. It's amazing. So Maurice moved back to the computer lab in 2002, when my predecessor, Ian Leslie, was the head of department and took up residence here. Just a couple of things. So first of all, he had after him various assistants. Joyce Hilling was mentioned, Penny Ainsworth is here, Nanette Blackmore is here, and Kate Ellis is the person who was in the computer lab. And you all will be pleased to know that he continued to dictate things right up into that last bit on these little tapes, that this is a 1960s model of a dictaphone, but right through to the end section in the computer lab, he made his memos like that, he wrote his letters like that, they were done for him, and off he went. So the lab was very pleased to provide that for him. I became head of department in 2004, and we continued much as before, in fact. He had the office next door to mine, just like he had at ORL. In this case, it didn't have a video phone, it actually had a door with a window in between them, so we didn't have to bother with all that nonsense. And life went on, and here are some of the things that during the 2002 period until just before he died, very shortly before he died, we did. So we went to functions at the Royal Society. He had been a Clifford Patterson lecturer. That's one of the prize lectures. I had been a Clifford Patterson lecturer. Roger Needham had been a Clifford Patterson lecturer. So we always went to the Clifford Patterson lecture, which involved Maurice being picked up by car, going down to London, lecture, dinner, and back. He was very fond of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and he continued to support them and encourage all their activities. Now, the version of the Royal Academy of Engineering trip is actually a fellow's visit somewhere. So we would go off, and sometimes it was by car, and I think even into the 2000s, I would still push him into my aeroplane, off we'd go somewhere. He rather liked that sort of thing, and so we made a trip like that. And then the IEE, or the IET as it's known right now, not only had he been a first president of the BCS, as you heard, but he had been a council member of the IEE, and there was a dining club, and we went and did things there. I wasn't the only one he went with, but we did quite a bit of that. And he kept on up with his drive, and already contacts have been mentioned. He was, very good at that, and would always synthesize what had happened, and so on. Having mentioned that he had the office next to mine, we did continue to discuss the computer lab strategy in every possible way. I mean, I would just go there. He has been, after I had the good fortune of him being my professor, my mentor over all that period of time, and I've done well out of it. The computer lab's done well out of it. Well, I took his advice very seriously, and it was very useful. We used to meet with the others a little bit around the coffee machine. There's always been this slight distance, but actually the coffee machine upstairs was a place where he interacted. And his normal phrase when walking into my office, and I'm sure people will echo this, is just touching base, and off we'd go and discuss something. But he's a very, was a very distinguished member of the computer lab. And so he's the only person to have got his own parking place. parking place. And it's right outside the door. You will recognize that place. Now, it's, the computer lab's pretty sort of even-handed place, so we don't really like that sort of thing. And, it was a little bit unusual. But lest you think that this was done because he was distinguished, it's actually to do with his parking, okay? So this is this is not as close to the front door as you can get. Well, it is that, but it's as far away from other cars as you can possibly make it. Now, I thought we were making progress at. It was getting worse and worse, and then we weren't quite sure what to do. But the man was brilliant. He had his cataracts fixed up. Okay. So his driving improved considerably, and the bumping reduced, and he used to puddle off down J.J. Thompson Avenue, not at 80 miles an hour, but at 40 miles an hour again. But anyway, so he ended up having this place, and that minimized the bumps. And he was one of these drivers, he was a relatively short stature man, so if you drove behind him, you weren't sure if there was anybody in the car at all. Just his nose poking out. Anyway, at some point he stopped driving, and so really that was a important moment for him. He certainly came into my office a number of times, kind of discussing that, thinking about it, talking about it, and he finally stopped, which did make a difference, because then the more regular trips to the computer lab reduced. However, on the occasions that I would go and see him at his home, it was marvelous, because you turn up and you have a good chat, but the man would wear a suit. He'd obviously, spruce himself up, a tie, that glint in his eye, and off we would go and continue, just like we had been doing for many years. So he had a sparkle in his eye, and so it was very nice to see that. Now, final comment is that not only is it that it was his 98th birthday yesterday, but of course it'll be the 100th anniversary of his birth in 2 years' time. Furthermore, just depending how you interpret words in reports, it will also, I'll point out to you, the 75th anniversary of the department of the mathematical laboratory, computer laboratory, although there was actually a computer lab before the mathematics, so you can watch it. So in 2 years' time, we have an opportunity. I'm not quite sure what it'll be, but something will come along, and I hope you will pay attention to it, and whatever activities we construct around that time, I very much hope that you all will participate as much as you can. So thank you very much. Could I now ask Anthony perhaps to just say a few words on behalf of the family, and then we will get into anecdotes galore.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's so nice to hear all these affectionate tributes. I've been sitting here listening and remembering all the things referred to. I was struck by Andy Herbert's story about the silent interview. I remember years ago my father advising me on business and how to conduct negotiations. He said the thing to do is to keep your mouth shut and wait for the other chap to commit himself. Well, perhaps that's what happened there. My father lived to an enormously great age, had a wonderful career, wonderful full life. But even at that great age, his loss is an enormous one to us, to me, to my sisters, Helen and Margaret, to his grandchildren, Alice, Oliver, Josie, Florence, Francis, and Peter. I think my father would have enormously liked and approved of this fitting occasion. I'm reminded of something he started saying latterly. He might say that he was thrilled, and there's a story there. he was invited in 1997 or thereabouts to one of the Queen's garden parties at Buckingham Palace, where he met Margaret Thatcher. Now, they obviously hit it off very well. But at a certain point, some journalists came up to Thatcher to ask her about something she'd been awarded or something of the sort, and she knew exactly what to say. She said, "Oh, I'm thrilled." And my father filed that away. And he used to use it when he was asked for a quote. He used to use it. Well, look, I'm not going to go until I've told you just a little about what it was like to be a young, technically minded boy growing up in the 50s with Maurice Wilkes' father. He had a lot of time for me. We did all sorts of projects together. The one I remember particularly was the telephone. My father, as been said before, had paid a great deal of attention to detail and also liked to do things from first principles. This was an elementary telephone. It consisted of a carbon granule microphone and an ordinary receiver involving a wound coil and a diaphragm. And we started with a collection of flat batteries which had been collected together and mined them for the carbon and ground it up. And then we used an old bird's eye custard powder tin. He didn't refer to this bird's eye custard as custard, he referred to it as cornflour sauce in order to point out the difference between that and real custard. And the coil for the receiver, we wound ourselves, and when we got a little tired of that, we hooked up his power drill to do the winding for us. And that's just typical of the sort of projects we did together when I was a child. Well, I'll let you get on to the question and answer session. Thank you so much, everybody. Take this from me.
Go left, right, and even though we mostly do know each other, just as a reminder for some, perhaps who don't know, if you could just say your name, please. So please join in. Andrew, just wait for the mic, because it's all being videoed and archived, so we can catch the audio.
Don, could you hold up that poster again? I'm going to have nightmares. I visited Maurice when he was working with you in Maynard, and you may remember you had cardboard cutouts of that photograph, which I guess were part of the advertising. And Maurice is so proud of these, there was one in the guest room. And I came to visit and stayed in the guest room, and you know what it's like with jet lag. You wake many times in the night, you wake bleary-eyed, and there was Maurice staring at you.
Q.
Quentin Stafford Fraser. I had the privilege of having an office next door to Maurice for a little while. I was at Andy's lab, and I think he made a very big impact on me, because on almost the first day I arrived at the lab, Andy came back from one of his summer trips with lots of good new ideas, and one of them was that everybody should be welcome to go to everybody else's meetings if they wanted to in the lab, find out what was going on. I thought this sounded like a great idea. I like this organization. So I turned up at a meeting, little meeting room, which was also used as the tea room at that point, sofas over there, and I didn't know it had been convened by Maurice. And so there I was sitting at the table, and he came in and he sat down, and he said, he looked around and he said, "You weren't invited to this meeting, were you?" And I said, "No, but I thought I'd come along if that's okay." I was quite nervous at that point. And he said, "If you will." And then a short pause, and he said, "Would you mind sitting over there somewhere?" But I learned to greatly appreciate his advice in the long term, but it was somewhat intimidating on almost my first day.
Very good. Come along now.
Robin Fairbairns. Andy made a comment about Maurice suggesting that he should move on. I'd be interested to know how many other people were, because I certainly was. I went...
Okay, hands up all those who were told to move on.
I'd asked him if he would give me a reference for a job, and he said, Fairbairns, I've been wondering when you'd move on.
Very true. So one over here, thank you.
My name is Jeff Hillmore. I'm one of the people who did the diploma here. In fact, 50 years ago, almost to the day, I think we were all sitting in Corn Exchange Street waiting for the results that year. And I think there are quite a lot of people who did the diploma who are here today. And I think all of us would like it recognised that the initiation of that diploma was one of Maurice's great achievements. There are people throughout the world, throughout the computer industry, who did that diploma and who've moved on to do things elsewhere. And it's something he did which has had a great, great influence in the world.
Annette Howarth, I did the diploma in '68, and I'd like to echo what had just been said about the diploma. It seemed to have an enormous influence. However, I came back in about 1979 in great trepidation with a small baby in a pushchair and went into the tea room in Corn Exchange, and as usual everybody was there, and as usual as a diploma student you could mosey up and ask them a question. But I moseyed up and said, Professor Wilkes, I've come back and thank you very much for the diploma. I said, I'm a married guy, who I met by that door, this is Alex, our baby. And Professor Wilkes said, well, at least the diploma was useful for something.
At the back there, thank you.
Peter Woodsford, I too did the diploma in '68 and was in the CAD group for a few years. And I was somewhat, I think, as many of us were, in awe of Maurice at that time. And it wasn't, maybe 20 years later, at Haddenham Steam Fair, there was a wonderful steam carousel with a Jacquard loom type system producing the music, and there was Maurice gazing intently at it. And I said, hello, sir, how are you? And he said, do you think we could have a ride? And so we did. And we bounced around and came off, and he said, I haven't enjoyed something like that since I was a boy. So ever since I wasn't quite as much in awe of him.
Very good. Oh, Nanette.
Thank you. I'm Nanette Blackmore. I was a secretary to Sir Maurice Wilkes just for the last 2 years of working at the lab. And it's been mentioned that we had cakes on a Tuesday morning, and Maurice always wanted a jam donut. And Fitzbillies would always send up a lovely tray full of cakes, and sometimes they would forget to send the jam donut. So I would go into him and I'd say, Maurice, I'm sorry we haven't got your donut today. What would you like to come out and choose another cake that you would like to have? And he turned to me and he looked and he said, no, I think I'll stay faithful to my jam donut.
Okay, a couple more contributions, and then we can move on to the reception outside. Behind you, Bo.
Right, Peter Kemp. I also did the diploma in the early 1960s, along with a number of other people who are here today. But I've got my own personal story of Maurice advising me on my career, and of course getting it spot on. because I moved from research, which I wasn't very good at, into computing services. And my particular interest in computing services was application software, not the sort of software that Maurice himself was often writing. He always said to me, you will never be a director of a computing service because you've never run a systems team. Well, later in my career, I went to work for University of Delaware in the States for a year. And early in that year, I was appointed director of the computing service at Reading. And I was really rather looking forward to coming to tell Maurice that I had made a directorship. A month before I was due to finish the year, the university had a crisis and asked me if I would lead the systems team for my last month there to sort out the mess. My first reaction was, damn you, Maurice, you're right again.
Okay, well, let me then wrap this up. Thank the speakers very much for all the effort that they've put in. And most of all, thank you all for coming and making today so memorable yet again. And now on to the reception. Thank you very much.